Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
Portfolio construction and risk management are tasks that take you away from where you need to be, building relationships with your clients. Aberdeen Standard Investments can support you by creating bespoke investment solutions. Outsourcing portfolio and risk management creates efficiencies, enabling you to focus on fulfilling the ambitions of both your clients and your business. This podcast has been prepared with care based on sources believed to be reliable, and all opinions expressed are honestly held at the applicable date. However, it is general information only, and we accept no liability for any errors or omissions. It's been prepared without taking into account the particular objectives, financial situation, or needs of any investor. Investing involves risk, including the risk of losing capital. It's important that before acting, investors should consider their own circumstances, objectives, and financial situation, the information's appropriateness to them, and consult financial and tax advisors. Investors should consider the PDS available at aberdeenstandard.com before making an investment decision. Products issued by Aberdeen Standard Investments Australia Limited, ABN 5900212334, AFSL number 204263.
Thanks for joining us again on the XY Advisor podcast. My name is Fraser Jack, and I'm joined with me today by Hayley Knight. Welcome.
Hello, Fraser. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. That's your second appearance on the XY Advisor podcast. A couple of years on, you were back in episode number 127.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that was a number. Yes, I have learned a lot since then. So hopefully this one has a bit more fresh value and content for you.
I'm sure it will. I know it will, in fact. Now, this is, of course, an episode we're talking about the Scale Up series, and we're talking about all things scale and advisors being able to, grow a business or increase their capacity or their efficiency or their effectiveness. And today we're talking about doing that through the concept of, outsourcing from a staff point of view or a task point of view, and really looking at how can advisors make the most out of their own time by doing the tasks that their income producing task, which is spending time in front of clients, and utilizing other staff in a really efficient and effective manner. So thank you for joining us today. Quickly, I thought we might just quickly start. If you want to give the listeners a quick overview of you and your business at the moment and how you've set it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in paraplanning for probably 15 plus years. Started off just as most paraplanners, doing my study, junior, working full-time, completing my studies. And after about 8 years of paraplanning, I decided to get into subcontracting. That's when I started working for CPS when it was first founded by Lee Shodell. And about a year later, I took it over, and that was back in 2013. So we've grown a lot since then over the last 8 years. We've got a huge team, about 26 contractors and 2 admin staff now. And we service advisors all over the nation, with a lot of them on the East Coast. So hello to any advisors who are listening, who are also our clients today.
Fantastic. Yeah, so 26 paraplanners, that's quite a lot. And as you said, grown fairly well. And I love the stat that you've done over 4,000 statements of advice for advisors.
Yeah. I'd like to take credit for that, but I haven't written many for quite a while. So my team are very good at it, which is a big part of the recruitment process with them. But yes, they are very good. We have seen all spectrums of advice and SOAs and that kind of thing. So it is definitely our jam.
Yes, fantastic. Now, we're not going to get into the intricate details of the SOA at the moment. We could talk about that all day, I think. But we really want to explore the concept of finding the right staff and going through that process of how do you actually outsource. What are the ways that work, I guess. What are the ways that don't work? And I know you put together a bit of a guide with sort of 5 main points on it. So if it's okay with you, can we run through those?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did find that a lot of advisors, and this can apply for both outsourcing and in-house recruitment of paraplanners, a lot of advisors just weren't sure what to look for in a paraplanner when they were recruiting. So this is what the guide kind of steps you through, the things to really look for. So the first step is to, you need to really pay attention when you're doing those initial interviews in your recruitment. So make sure that you pick the right person. So that's a lot easier said than done. But picking the right person, we've broken that down to a couple of micro steps. And the first one is your software skills. So this is pretty much a given. Now, the things to look for with software skills. So people could have used a particular software for a couple of years and not really know it. So with software skills, we try to ask very specific questions in scenarios. So saying, can you talk me through the process of how you would merge out an SOA and what tools you would use, or what happens when this kind of error comes up in the modeling? What does that normally say? And that will give you an indication of their understanding of the software and its capability, because you want someone who really knows it to get the most out of it, because I know that it can cost a fair bit in subscription.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really interesting point, spending some time in the interview or with the person and making sure that they go through, that they can demonstrate to you what their software skills are when it comes to the specific software that's being used. How do you go about that in a practical term? Do you do a little test or test their skills in some way, or is it just you taking it?
Yes. So you could do it verbally. But what I've seen done before, and which I think works quite well, is that you can either screen share with them, say on Zoom, or open up your software, or if they're in there, you could do that on a projector if you wanted to do that, and just say, here's our test client. Can you do an insurance comparison? Give them a little case study to work on and just watch them as they work through it. You'll be able to see how quickly and how much ease they work through it. It'll give you a pretty strong understanding for what they know straight up.
Yeah, so just watching where they click and how fast they are to be able to get to the next part of the process.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What's next after that?
So the next one is their writing skills. So this one, it's really quite important. And I know that everybody has done their, year 12 English at high school. This is a little bit different because a good paraplanner knows how to communicate the advice and explain it to a client who doesn't have that technical knowledge, right? So an easy way to see this is ask for an example SOA from them, which paraplanners can do if they take all the identification stuff out. If you can't get that, other ways that you can have a look is their resume, very simply, is it easy to understand? Can you capture what they're saying quite quickly? Other things, look at their LinkedIn bio. Are you rereading sentences? Is it hard to understand? Is it communicating very well when it comes to how they write? Because that's how it's going to come across as well in the SOA. So you want someone who can clearly explain something in written text so they can easily communicate that to the client who's receiving the advice.
Yeah, this is a really, really important skill, isn't it? And it's sort of one that comes with a bit of experience, but also, it could well be, and correct me if I'm wrong here, often somebody who's very big on the detail likes to explain things in a way where they're very big on the detail, and the person, or often if somebody's reading it, they just want to know the outcome. So it could be quite a misalignment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And also people learn different ways. So if you're kind of finding that the client isn't understanding that advice, it could be a case of saying, I'm going to do a flow chart as well as written text, and making sure that we are kind of writing to both types of learners. But it is that's a main point of a paraplanner, is to be able to break down that technical jargon and explain it to a client, because an advisor is doing that in the meeting verbally. We need to document that.
Yeah, and this is where a lot of, I guess, advisors and planners will want to have their own sort of text in certain things that describe a strategy in a particular way. Is that also be correct?
Yeah. So a lot of advisors tend to they have preferences in the way things are worded. So you would have a licensee template, and then sometimes advisors go, I use this strategy all the time. I found that this type of text works really well with my clients, and it kind of represents them quite well. So advisors do have, some advisors do have specific preferences in the wording of the text as well, which I can help you with how to communicate that to your paraplanner later down in the series. But it is important to really understand the language that you're going to use in the SOA to make sure it's clear.
Yeah, fantastic. So them understanding the software, then being able to articulate themselves in a manner or the information in a manner which the client can understand. What's the next area?
Yeah, so the next one is your strategy experience. So this kind of ties in with your software skills and the way that you communicate. But you obviously have to have some kind of technical knowledge, right? And so obvious ways of finding that is through what studies or qualifications they have. But you could be like me, and there are paraplanners out there like me who have done, a fair bit of study. And if you ask me a technical question today, I'm probably not the best person to ask. So you could use this in your case study, say with your, when you're running through the drill with your paraplanner in the meeting and you've got your run through of the software, you could say, let's start off with this case study. Here's Tom, he's 50, he's doing X, Y, Z. What do you think at a high level would be a good strategy for him or things for us to consider initially? And that will give you an indication for what their technical skills are like. With that case study as well, if you are, say, primarily a retirement advisor and you don't do much risk advice, have your case study that's kind of geared towards that to see if they do specialize in that area as well, because that will help you down the track as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, it's very common for advisors to specialize in certain areas. Is that the same for paraplanners?
Yes and no. So you'll find contractors at the moment, they're pretty much experienced across the board. And the reason they do that is to pick up the most amount of work. But we're starting to see a specialization of paraplanners, and because advisors are also starting to really have a niche. And so it's kind of just adapting with the market. But at the moment, most paraplanners you'll find are still experienced across the board technically.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, the next step in the process, you've got here a comment about first impressions in the interview.
Yeah, so this, I actually think this is really important because sometimes paraplanners do have face-to-face interactions with clients, depending on if they're in-house or outsourced, obviously. But I think you really need to ask yourself the question, is this someone who I would be comfortable talking to my clients and interacting with my clients? And a way to get a good gauge of that is when you first meet them, how did you actually feel? Like, where you're like, oh, this is someone who's really trustworthy. I feel like they know what they're talking about. They're kind, they listen. Or do you feel like you're kind of pulling back a bit when you're talking to them and you're not quite sure? So first impressions are really important because I feel like they're the basis of that relationship between the advisor and the paraplanner.
Yeah, fantastic. And talk to me about the idea around assessing their skills. And we've just sort of been through the main things that they should have, but how would an advisor go and sort of ask a paraplanner to demonstrate those skills?
Yeah, so apart from doing a case study, you can also ask for examples of their work, like their actual work. Sometimes you can have a look at their assignments from their studies that could give you an indication. But I think another thing that we do in our interviews with our paraplanners is we actually get a gauge for their experience as a whole by asking a few simple questions. And one of those questions is, how long would a super and risk SOA take you? And I know it's a question is how long is a piece of string, right? There's so many variables in that, but their answer will give me a strong indication for how much they actually know and what their experience overall is. So say, for example, if I had someone come in and say, oh, I'll have that done in 2 hours. To me, it's like, okay, I don't know how much attention to detail they actually have, or are they actually asking the right questions? I've had other people respond to me saying, oh, it's probably about 10 plus hours. And you're like, okay, that also gives you an indication of how they work. Do they overestimate things? Do they think too much about things? And then finally, the other response I typically get, and it's very much a paraplanner response, is I'm going to need more information. Can you tell me blah, 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 blah? And that gives me a strong kind of feeling as to what their experience is and what they're going to be like to work with overall.
Yeah, because a big part of this is obviously, asking the right questions to start with, and with a short question around, how long would that take? And obviously the answer is it depends. Always, the answer is always it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. What sort of timeframes would you be looking for in something like that?
Yeah. So for a super and risk SOA, and I'm going to give away the answer to any potential paraplanners. So I'm going to have to change the question slightly. So they, although they will get bonus points for listening to this. So I'm just letting them know. I would be probably looking for, the answer I'd probably be looking for is around 4 to 5 hours, given I've got X, Y, and Z to get these things done. That's for me, the ideal answer. But a variation of that, to me, also gives me a good indication.
Yeah, fantastic. Depending on the complexity.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but so that sort of sums up what you sort of say about trying to find the right person. There's obviously there's a lot to it. It's not just as simple as just you're the right person for this job by the sound of it. What's the next step in your process?
Yeah, so step 2 is to create a clear vision. And there's 2 components of that. The first is the strategy. So really understanding technically what this is and what the advice is. And then the second step is aesthetics. So how does it look in the SOA?
Yep.
And what does the advisor like? So when you're looking for a paraplanner, and we've already spoken a bit about technical knowledge and those kind of things, so we won't go back over that. But the second component here is the aesthetics, and this is where we see a lot of to and fro between the advisor and paraplanner, regardless of whether it's in-house or outsourced. And the reason being is that a licensee has a template, and then we typically see each advisor has a variation of that they like. Over time, it may slightly change. So they might change some colors of things, or they might like certain things scented, or those kind of things, formatting. And then by the time it comes to you as a paraplanner, if you don't have that refined, very clear set out of how exactly you want it formatted and all of those little simple things that add up, it can become frustrating for both you, the paraplanner, and the advisor communicating that. So we came up with, for CPS, we came up with a way to kind of bridge that gap and reduce that to and fro. And we call it a style guide. So essentially, when a new client, a new advisor signs up with us, we spend about an hour with them, asking them questions, all different questions about how they like things set out. What are their preferences? What kind of spacing do you like? What colors do you like? How do you like us? What names do you like us to use with the clients? Is it nicknames? Is it full names? Like all these types of little questions. What is your licensee split? All of those simple things, we document them because they stay the same for every single SOA. And it's like a reference guide for the paraplanner to go, okay, so I've got the foundation here in my style guide. I know I just need to put together the strategy and get that into the SOA. And as long as those 2 things marry up, the advisor will be happy, right? So you can do the same thing with your paraplanner. Sit down and really think about what are the things that are important to you in an SOA in terms of how it looks and how it's laid out. Even just bullet point it. And then each time, if you're getting an SOA and there's something in there that you don't quite like, just add it to the style guide and say, I actually prefer it like this. So each time the paraplanner, even if you're changing your paraplanner, you've got this standard reference guide, so you don't have to go over it every single time when you're reading through that feedback and reviewing the SOAs.
Yeah, this is a really good tip for each advisor to have their style guide. As you said, even if they're changing their paraplanner, to be able to say, this is what we want it to look and feel. And, look like and the clients to experience, so that also when we're going through it with the client, we can actually, we know our way around it as well. How do they create a style guide?
Yeah, so we've just kept it really simple. It is literally a Word document, and we have just bullet points. So if any of your listeners out there, anyone out there wanting to see an example of this, just contact me and I'm happy to send it through and give you an example of ones that we use. But it's literally just bullet point. And then sometimes if it needs further explanation, we'll put a little blurb underneath. So we don't try and overthink it. It will be a couple of pages. And so it's just a kind of quick reference guide, which will cover off the entire SOA.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Reach out to Hayley if you're looking for that. Now, the next thing, just on this clear vision concept, we sort of skipped over the idea around strategies, and but a lot of the time, advisors will have their philosophy on the way that their investment philosophy or their insurance needs analysis philosophy or whatever it might be. Is that included in the style guide, or is that something you would go through separately?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it because that is an important point of the style guide. Once again, advisors do have their preferences. They like certain products in certain situations and those kind of things. They like to see certain things in the modeling and assumptions and that kind of stuff. All of that can be captured in the style guide. So kind of look at the style guide as in it's not going to change per SOA. It's going to be the same standards with every SOA. The only thing that wouldn't go in there is something that would change that's specific to that client. So anything else that's general goes in the style guide. Anything that's specific to the client, that stays separate in a file note.
Fantastic. Thank you for clearing that up. So that takes us through the clear vision. What's the next part of the process?
Yeah, so the next one is step 3, and that is to agree to clear deadlines. Now, I know that sounds really simple, but in practice, we often see this blows out, right? And the worst case scenario, and I've seen this, I've done this personally myself when I was a paraplanner, is you are printing an SOA just as the client has walked in for their meeting, and it is chaos, like chaos. And what it means is that you're not taking the time to make sure that you have paid attention to those details and the things. It's when I've made the most mistakes is when I'm rushed. As soon as that advice is ready, so you both agreed that we're ready to go to an SOA, you're having the conversation with the paraplanner and you're communicating that to them. A big part of that conversation is, when do you need this back by? As in, when is the client booked in? And it's not, can I have it back that morning? It is, can I have it back 2 days prior? At least it needs to be finalized, because it gives you breathing space. It means the advisor is ready for that meeting. The SOA is good and done. And it's also giving the paraplanner a little bit of space. If anything does go wrong, there's a little bit of space to fix that up. So what I mean by finalized is the SOA is written, it's been checked by the advisor, the final proof has come through, everybody's happy, and we're good to go. Setting those clear deadlines also can be broken down further. So when is that first draft going to get to the advisor? If there's information that is still required to write that SOA, when is that going to be completed by? And what are the consequences if it's not? So as soon as you set those clear expectations, everybody's on the same page, and you'll avoid those times when it's just rushing into client meetings where all the mistakes generally happen.
It's the worst feeling, isn't it? Walking into a meeting and being prepared.
I know. And there's been so many, I can remember when I was a paraplanner and you were printing as the client was coming in. And if you see a mistake on the printout and you just go, this is a question, do I fix this now and then make the client wait? Or will they see it? Or do you know what I mean? And it's awful. It feels awful doing it.
Yeah. And the answer, of course, is, it depends. It depends.
Yes, it depends. That's right. That's what it always comes back to, isn't it?
Yeah. So talk to me about deadlines, for example, because, the turnaround time for SOAs has been, seems to have got longer and longer over time. Am I right there? Or?
Yeah, it gets longer with the length of the SOAs. That's it. So to give you an indication, so in-house, obviously it depends on the workflow of that advisor? It depends. But outsourcers, you will tend to see that they should turn around within a week. I feel like we should guarantee a turnaround time for advisors, which is why CPS does it. And if you're not getting that deadline from your outsourcer, ask for it and just say, can you tell me when I'm going to have this back? Because I have client meeting booked 2 days after, So make sure you set that expectation even with your outsourcer from the start, and have that conversation about, cool, so we're agreeing that this is going to be, the first draft will be done by then. I will have these things done by then, so that everybody knows what to expect from the outset.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned the guarantee word there. Did you say you do guarantee?
Yeah, we do. So we have a 7 business day guarantee turnaround, which our advisors really like. And it doesn't mean that they always take 7 business days. It just means that you will have it back within 7 business days. So, and I feel like advisors need that. It's so difficult to plan and get clients in when you don't even know when that work's coming back. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 6 weeks, who knows? So with the best outsourcers, I would actually hold them to a delivery date at the very least.
Yeah, I guess that means the advisor can make the call in the first meeting or whatever meeting they're up to say, right, we're going to provide you the advice, come back in 2 weeks from now and we'll book the date in right now, and knowing that the SOA is going to be back in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Booking the client in when they're still warm. Like if you know your outsourcer takes a week, if you've still got the client in the office, just like you said, it's cool, I'll book you in for 2 weeks and we'll be set. We'll be good.
Yep, fantastic. All right, so that's the agreeing the deadlines. Step 3. Talk to us about step 4.
Yeah, so this is also really important. So you need to develop a really strong relationship with your paraplanner. And this is in-house and outsourced. I know that there's kind of this idea that outsourcers are not really a part of the team and there's like this separation because they're not physically there. Outsourcers are paraplanners, right? And it is a very isolated role. And to have that kind of interaction and engagement and feel like a part of a team is when you will get the best out of your paraplanner, because they will feel also a stronger accountability for their work and towards you and their team. So just keep that in mind. In that and developing that, a big part of it is taking into consideration what it's like for a paraplanner to first start in the new role. Whether it's outsourced or in-house, you go through the same thing. So you could be as experienced as you like as a paraplanner, but if you start working with a new advisor, you have still a lot of things to learn, and that are specific to that advisor, their systems and processes, who their team are, their products, developing that style guide, those kind of things. So take the time to make sure, firstly, that they're confident in that role, as in, do they have everything that they need? It could be simple things like logins for all the softwares. If they're going to be in-house, setting them up with an internal email, have that sitting and ready for them. Having a list of frequently asked questions in your business, or things that you go, the last paraplanner found this really useful. You might, here's a couple of reference points. Making the training as seamless as possible, but also taking time with them just to sit and get to know them as well. And it probably sounds a little bit weird with an outsourcer in particular, like getting to know them. But these could be simple things like having a 30-minute chat with them when you first meet them and say, cool, this is how we work. What are the things that you like to do? And I like to do these things. And just kind of developing that over time, I think, is really important, because then you'll tend to see that your paraplanner will stick around for a lot longer because they feel like they're more included in that team. And finally, a really good couple of examples of SOAs is so valuable to a paraplanner, because that's the way that we're setting the clear expectations to go, this is what we want ideally. This is what we're working towards, and I can use that as another reference point to create the same work that you've been accustomed to as well.
Yeah, it seems fairly obvious to me that, having that longer term relationship with the paraplanner, or the paraplanner having a longer term relationship with the advisor that they're looking after, and getting to know all those, just the little things about how they like things, and or whether it's their lack of file notes or the lack of whatever it might be that they get understanding what that person means by that phrase. But I just want to ask you a question on this, because it's simple. I guess it's a lot simpler if you've got one paraplanner, that advisor. But of course, how do you do this if you've got like 2 or 3 different paraplanners? Because obviously, maybe from time to time, some people want to go on holiday and take some time off. How do we work that with more than one paraplanner?
Yeah, so it really, I was just going to say, it really depends. But essentially what I found worked quite well. If you are outsourcing, I would use an intermediary company like CPS. There's other ones like Padua, where you're working. There's an intermediary there, so they can help manage that relationship as well. So the paraplanner also remains a part of a team if it's not your team. If it's in-house, you've got multiple paraplanners, I would really consider having like a team mentor, team leader, paraplanning leader, someone there who the other paraplanners can kind of work with and look up to as well, to build a secondary relationship. But primary, it needs to be a good paraplanner advisor relationship, I think, because even when you've got multiple paraplanners, you're going to see different variations of the same work unless you have that direct relationship with the advisor and the paraplanner. So try and get someone else, have someone else in a bit of a leadership role in that team, whether it's a manager or not, depends on the situation. But in any instance, every paraplanner needs to have a good relationship with the advisor to make sure that if someone's not there, the senior's not there, or, there's changes in the team, there's always one solid foundation there.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, a lot of the building that good long-term strong relationship evolves around amazing communication and, both ways. I guess that leads us into the 5th point here.
Yeah, it does. So this is quite important, which is to give regular feedback. So as a paraplanner, it can be quite tough because an SOA can be subjective, even though there's obviously the standard stuff. What you, Fraser, want in an SOA and what I want in an SOA could be completely different things, even if they're both compliant, right? So the feedback is the key here, and giving consistent and clear feedback is what is going to save your life in the long run. So initially, it is going to take a lot more time. Absolutely, you're going to have to invest into the process, but over the long run, you will see the fruits of your labor, essentially. So a couple of tips on here. I've seen a lot of different ways that feedback has been provided before, working with so many different advisors, and the most effective feedback that I've ever seen. And if you want I will throw out a name, and it's Corey Wassell from Verswell. He's the king of this. I've been on the receiving end of this, and it was like a magical experience getting this feedback. I look forward to it. I'll give you an example of what actually happened. So what happened was Corey would review the document himself. So he'd go through it. He'd turn on track changes on the Word document, so you could see any work that he was doing or changing in the SOA. Then once he'd gone through it, he would then turn on Loom, some kind of screen recording software. You could do it in Zoom, whatever floats your boat. You have the document up on the screen, pop your little face in the corner so we can see who's talking and, what your facial expressions are to get that feedback as well. And talk them through it, scroll through it. Say, I changed this because of X. I don't like it, this part, but I've done this. Here's an example. And then he always ended it saying, can you add these things to your we had a reference guide. So can you add these things to your reference guide? They've changed slightly. I want to do this now. And what it meant was a couple of things. Is we had a video. So if I couldn't quite pick up the feedback straight away, I could go back and watch that part and get it explained again. And then I also had a document that had it written in there, what his changes were and his example for it. And then over time, you'd find because of that, it was so clear and effective. He'd only have to do it once, and then you're cutting down that to and fro. So take the time to give that feedback. But you'll find that after 5 or so SOAs, you're probably only looking at a couple of key things to check it and make sure it's right, which is where you'll start to see reap the rewards of your work. And finally, also have that meeting or the phone call with them just to say, I just wanted to have a quick chat with you. Here's my video, but overall, I thought this. Let's focus on these things. And it's also an opportunity just to check in and say, yeah, cool, I'm overall happy, because it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell written, like it's hard to tell what advisor's actually thinking and feeling. And then finally, if you are seeing consistent things being repeated, even though you've given that feedback, I think you need to approach it in a different way and say, think about it from a vision of like, what can we change so that this stops happening? Because paraplanners don't do it on purpose. It could be just something simple that's tricking them up. Could be the software, the template, who knows? So kind of changing that conversation, saying what can we change to stop this from happening in future, which is where the most effective feedback comes in. But if you're finding that you're constantly to and fro all of the time and it's the same stuff and it's frustrating, everyone's getting frustrated, take the time to really think about how you give the feedback to make sure it's clear and it's well communicated to your paraplanner.
Yeah, fantastic. And shout out to Corey. And it doesn't surprise me at all that he was very good, because he does love a Loom video and just jumping on, explaining things. And you're absolutely right. If you write some feedback, it can be taken in the way that the person, well, the mood of the person isn't at the time when they're reading it. Whereas a video in a nice, softly spoken way, and this is what I've changed, and this is what I'd like, and can you update your style guide or whatever we want to call the document? That's fantastic. Yeah, so that's a really good tip. Well done. And of course, I'm also thinking around the concept of regular times in the diary where you actually do these feedback conversations. If you're going to do a quick catch up, even if it's just to say, I'm really happy with everything. Yeah,
I love that, because we still at CPS, we have an SOA rating. So it's like Uber. You know how they give you that, they go, how was your driver? Straight after you finish. We do pretty much the same thing without every SOA. So we're getting kind of a real-time feedback as to how an advisor feels about that quality of that SOA. But it needs to extend further than that. So we could be having a paraplanning getting 4 or 5 stars all the time. But until we actually have the conversation with the advisor, we don't really know, what they're thinking. They could just be being nice. So having that conversation with your paraplanner, they would love that. And it just kind of reaffirms that relationship that you have with them as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So those are your 5 points: finding the right person, assessing them, checking their skills, creating a clear vision, agreeing to the deadlines and the outcomes and who's going to do what by when, developing strong relationships, and giving regular feedback. Thank you for sharing that with us. Just while I've got you, though, I wanted to talk about some of the objections. What are some of the objections people have to using outsources, and how do they sort of get their head around it?
Yeah, so a consistent one we get is concerns over confidentiality and the protection of the information. So as you can understand, there is a huge transfer of data. The right outsourcers don't actually own that data. So what actually happens with most of the bigger outsourcers is that we will use a login to your software and you have full control over what we do and don't see. And you also need to look for security policies of that company. So, for example, we have in place saying, cool, when the SOA is finished, the paraplanner needs to go through these 5 things to make sure, no data is kept on their computer for that particular client. We only access things in these times. So the protection of the data makes complete sense to me as well, is making sure that everything is safe there. And I think there's kind of this reservation of using onshore and offshore, like offshore is riskier. I don't know if that is actually the case, because my kind of thought is like it's all over the internet. So I don't know why a location really does matter. I can see it like certain points, but I think as long as you're working with a reputable company or a reputable outsourcer, that's probably the key thing in terms of protecting your data. The other thing that we find commonly comes up is the cost of outsourcing an SOA. So Most providers either work in a per plan basis fee, or they'll work on an hourly basis. I recommend working with a per plan basis, because what it means is that it's an incentive for a paraplanner to work faster if they're working with the same advisor every time. And then secondly, you know exactly what it's going to cost straight up. So sometimes things will blow out. Sometimes SOAs take twice as long as you initially think, but the paraplanner wears it because they probably have learnt something from that as well. So you'll get to understand the cost straight up if you have a per plan basis as well. So those are probably the key things, is like the cost and, you know, how to factor that in, and the security.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, the cost per plan is obviously fairly simple for when you're pricing your advice, process, to understand if it's going to cost approximately this. Therefore, I can easily price that into my process. I don't have to worry about how long it's going to take or not take. Just on the location though, because I find this really interesting. As you mentioned, the data is on the internet, not necessarily in a secure location like we always used to keep information in a locked filing cabinet. Well, now it's in a global area, even though if it might be stored on servers in Australia, it's still accessible from anywhere on the web. And this is something that's really important. That's been the structure of your growth in your business as well, as a contract paraplanning business, to be able to grow and scale your business from, say, Far North Queensland.
That's exactly right. So in Cairns, like, we're obviously quite limited in terms of not only as a paraplanner, your career options, but also there's not many people who live here. So having that kind of limitation with your location makes it difficult. I wouldn't be able to have the business this size if it was just based in Cairns. Like, there's no question. And the other thing as well is that scaling, if you're looking to scale, considering outsourcing or just having someone remote working opens up the possibilities in your candidates, right? Because you could have someone amazing over in Western Australia and you're on the East Coast. You then have that option, if you are open to remote working, to scale, and it may make your recruitment process easier because you've got a much wider net to cast there.
Yeah, I would imagine that's definitely the case with a lot of regional places in Australia anyway, being able to find great staff no matter where they are in the country. And you're absolutely right about remote working. It's if 2020 has taught us anything, it's how to move your employees to a remote zone and be able to either work from home or work from anywhere in the country. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, because some reservations, I think, with that I've kind of heard with like remote working and when you have a salaried team member, is like, oh, they're just going to slack off and watch Dr. Phil all day or whatever. And it's actually not like that. A lot of the studies suggest that the people who work from home are more productive than they would be if they're in the office. And I think people really appreciate that flexibility as well. So my recommendation is just to be open to it, because my entire team is remote working, and I wouldn't just hire a candidate because they're in Cairns. I would need to see, like, they would have to also be amazing, just happen to be in Cairns as well.
Yep. Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that wisdom with us. Of course, you've been able to scale and grow your business over the past 8 years to be quite a large organisation and servicing advisors here in Australia, or I guess anywhere, wherever they are. Tell us, what are the plans from here? What do you hope for the future to hold for you?
Yeah, so I'm loving the size of the business, but we are definitely looking to scale. So just recently, we've seen a bit of a change in our team. I've had a day-to-day manager just leave her role. And what it means for me is that instead of filling that role straight away, I'm looking to see what we can do with it to bring it back. Does it need to be a full-time role? I don't know. So that's the process I'm going through at the moment, is reviewing it and understanding it, and then seeing if we can use systems to replace some of it. I don't think we can do it with all. I still think you need the client face-to-face stuff. So our focus, we're really interested as well in innovation and kind of pushing this to the limit with the SOAs. I think there's a lot of movement with SOAs at the moment. People are starting to explore other options and, technology and that kind of stuff. So essentially we're looking to grow, but we're also looking in other areas in terms of innovation as well.
Fantastic. And so you'll be able to take that innovation to the existing advisors that use you.
Yeah. So that's where we pretty much are just testing things to see how they work. And to me, that's what a big part of a paraplanner is to understand what is out there to make the advisor's life easier. Because I think advisors, their time is best spent with their clients, and the paraplanner needs to take the back office and really do what they can to make the advisor's life easier and do what they're good at as well.
Fantastic. I think that was very well put, and we'll probably leave it there. So thank you, Hayley, so much for coming on the XY Advisor podcast. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Fraser. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, there you have it, another episode of the XY Advisor podcast. And now I'm joined with Emily. Hey, Emma.
Hey, Fraser. How's it going?
It's tremendous. Thank you for asking. And now a really cool part of the week when we get to do some shout outs and talk about some XY members.
Yes, my favourite part of the week. So today's shout out goes to two XY legends, Anita McCoo and Kathy KS. So Anita posted into the platform saying she needed some help to compare a direct insurance policy, couldn't figure out how to do it on Risk Researcher. Kathy came in, they jumped on a call. Kathy was able to walk Anita through it. Anita then did a screen share video to explain to everyone else in the XY community and shared that video. There's been comments in there to say, thank you so much for sharing, got lots of value out of it. Just a real classic case of peer-to-peer collaboration and being able to solve a problem and get to that quicker than we could trying to figure it out on our own. So amazing stuff, Anita and Kathy. Thank you for collaborating, and more importantly, thank you for sharing it with everyone else on the platform. Really appreciate it.
Hey, that was really well said. Well done, Anita. Well done, Kathy. That was perfect conversation to put on XY and to get that video across. Awesome work. Well done. Good shout out.